Hey, Sox fans, it's Mailbag Wednesday. I got some great fan-centric questions to get to from our listeners talking about Eloy Jimenez, Lucas Giolito, Mike Clevinger, and my favorite, Jerry Reinsdorf. The White Sox made a recent addition, and I've got a question about the possible impact that Jake Marisnick might have in 2023.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The White Sox could benefit from bringing in another catcher. There's one out there still in free agency, but is the price too steep? When will the front office feature baseball minds that did not play for the White Sox or have long-standing company ties? And who has more to prove in 2023, Lucas Giolito or Mike Clevinger? Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. We are in the off-season mode. If you're just jumping in to the podcast with spring training right around the corner, or maybe you've just found us for the first time, we are in our off-season mode, 3 episodes a week instead of the traditional 5. We'll get back to those everyday episodes once pitchers and catchers report in mid-February. If there's some major news, though, on the White Sox front, don't worry. Those episodes can be modified. Look for another episode on Thursday this week, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the week of January 23rd. Thanks again for all of the new subscribers on the YouTube channel as we are trying to take over the AL Central, still chasing the Guardians, Twins, and Tigers, but really appreciate you subscribing and passing this podcast along to other White Sox fans in your life. It is Mailbag Wednesday. We've got some great questions. Again, the email address is lockedonsox@gmail.com, and we're doing these mailbags every Wednesday until probably when pitchers and catchers report and spring training gets into action there. First question, and this one has been talked about quite a bit. It was really talked about a lot last off season and even at the trade deadline. This from Nathan. Do you think Eloy Jimenez gets traded? If so, for what? Into who? Before Eloy Jimenez caught fire during the second half of this past season, I thought there was a chance that Eloy Jimenez would be traded in the offseason. He didn't. We really didn't know about Jose Abreu's future at that time. It became more apparent, of course, as September rolled on. Obviously, when the Jose Abreu situation developed, and it seemed like for sure the White Sox were going to let him walk, and Andrew Vaughn would then shift to his natural position of first base. Keeping Eloy Jimenez for the DH role made complete sense. But we didn't have a left fielder until mid-December when the Benintendi news broke. So now the White Sox have a natural left fielder, a natural first baseman, and they can use Eloy Jimenez as the primary DH, despite Pedro Grifol's desires to have him take reps in right field. Eloy Jimenez is signed through 2024 with club options for 2025 and 2026. I don't think we truly know what we have in Eloy Jimenez. I don't know if anybody really knows. And if he stays healthy, which is a big if, as it is with every single player, especially with the core on this White Sox team. I mean, if he stays healthy, I've talked about it recently. I'm sure you have talked about it in your, White Sox fan circles. It could be a 40 home run, 90 to 100 RBI season for Eloy Jimenez. I know he doesn't want to be the main DH, but we want what's best for you almost. We want to protect you. We want to keep you healthy. You're not here for your glove. You're here for your bat and what you can do. If there is an interest in trading him, I think he would get interest from a lot of teams, right? It would just depend on what they wanted out of him, how they wanted to use Eloy Jimenez. I know, the Rockies are in need of some outfield help. The Reds, the Athletics could use outfield help. The Athletics could use just about everything. Now, before Sean Murphy was dealt to Atlanta, the host of Lockdown Athletics, he talked to me about maybe, would you be interested in trading and giving up Eloy Jimenez instead of maybe Andrew Vaughn? And that's when the Sox were still kicking the tires on Sean Murphy. I don't think Eloy Jimenez would be a good fit in the outfield there at the Coliseum. That is a massive area to roam. I would assume that they would use him probably as a DH. Now, the Rockies have Brendan Rodgers, a second baseman. The Sox desperately still need a veteran second baseman to really make a go, not only at the AL Central, but beyond. And the Reds, I really don't know if they would even be in a market for Eloy Jimenez. But I don't think any of those teams really want to put him in the outfield, though. Everybody in all of the MLB have seen what Eloy has done in the outfield. I think they want his power. They want his bat. They want to protect him and use him as a DH. So I think Eloy Jimenez remains on the White Sox, and he becomes an absolute force in 2023. Thank you, Nathan, for that question. James here with this question. What do you think the White Sox can get out of Jake Marisnick? Can he help out in 2023? So, this was a recent addition by the Chicago White Sox. Steve Adams had an article with MLB Trade Rumors about this. White Sox have agreed to a minor league contract with outfielder Jake Marisnick. Marisnick will be invited to Major League spring training and would earn a $1.3 million salary if he makes the team. Marisnick going to be 32 in March, spent the 2022 season with the Pirates, for whom he posted an unimpressive 234, 272, 390 slash line in a tiny sample of 82 plate appearances. He's appeared in the majors every year since debuting with the Marlins back in 2013, but has never topped the 372 plate appearances he recorded with the Houston Astros back in 2015. Overall, he's a lifetime 228, 281, 384 batter and just over 2,000 plate appearances. Though his 235, 292, 412 slash against lefties is a slight improvement over those career rates. The signing of Marisnick gives the Southsiders a potential right-handed hitting complement to lefty swinging right fielder Gavin Sheets, and to a lesser extent, a complement for fellow lefty Andrew Benintendi in left field, though Benintendi will likely play every day regardless of the opponent. Boy, I sure hope so. In that sense, Marisnick could potentially fill a role similar to the one Adam Engel had occupied for the White Sox in recent seasons. Marisnick is capable of playing any of the three outfield slots, is generally regarded as a plus defender at each. StatCast ranked him in the 85th percentile of major leaguers in terms of average sprint speed this past season, and the 96th percentile in terms of arm strength. Of his over 5,000 career innings in the outfield, 4,200 of them have come in center field. Marisnick then is also a viable defensive-minded backup in the event of a Luis Robert injury. Well, we do not want to see Marisnick roaming center field because that, of course, means Robert is on the shelf with another injury. We need Luis Robert probably more than any other player this season to live up to his potential, in my mind. So, players definitely, emerge out of spring training, of course. Sox need outfield depth. To say that Gavin Sheets is an outfielder is very generous, but that's where the Sox have played him. And that's what, Adams referred to in this MLB trade rumors article, of course. If they're maxed out financially and there are going to be no more trades, then maybe Jake Marisnick wins a spot, something to definitely watch carefully next month in Glendale, Arizona. Lots have been made about Lucas Giolito's possible return to his former self. I'm going to tell you why Mike Clevinger might have more to prove. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to basketball. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which I'm sure you do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. So, question from Lori here. Lucas Giolito has a walk year coming up, and the eyes are on him to return to form. But Mike Clevinger also has a lot of pressure to return to form. Who has more to prove? Thank you, Lori. Both have big seasons coming up. Sox rolled the dice on Clevinger, and a lot has been made about Lucas Giolito. I feel like he is a topic of conversation just about every week with what he is trying to do to return to his former self. So this is from a actual recent MLB.com article entitled 7 Players with the Most to Prove in 2023. This was by Brian Murphy. So Mike Clevinger in Chicago joined forces early in the offseason on a 1-year, $8 million contract that contains a mutual option for 2024. The former Cleveland pitcher is hoping his familiarity with the AL Central assists in a personal revival. From 2017 to 2019, he ranked 6th among qualified starters with a 1.52 ERA plus. In that final year, he was in the 90th percentile or better in average exit velocity and strikeout percentage. Clevinger doesn't anticipate his velocity being a problem this season. At 32 years old, he can't afford another lost year. And then how about Lucas Giolito? I mean, we've compiled a lot of info on what has gone wrong and what he'd like to go right. His 4.90 ERA was nearly a run and a half higher than his ERA in each year from 2019 through 2021. His 81 ERA plus would have tied for second worst among qualified starting pitchers if he had recorded just one more out in order to qualify. He termed the season as a failure. Giolito said he has taken off that extra weight this offseason and is focusing more on fluid movement. He will undoubtedly be one of the best starters in next year's free agent class if he rebounds in 2023. A 2022 repeat could give prospective buyers lots of questions about his future value. For Rick Hahn and company, a Clevinger resurgence, it would be a big deal. It would mean that they gambled and won, because Clevinger is definitely not a sure thing. It would be similar, I guess, to the Cueto situation last year. Clevinger more expensive, but if Clevinger performs above and beyond, then the White Sox might have an answer for the starting rotation in 2024. If Lucas Giolito comes back all the way and returns to his 2019 self or better, all-star team, 6th in Cy Young voting, if not better, I think his services would be too rich for the Chicago White Sox. So maybe Giolito has more to prove to himself and to other suitors out there, and Clevinger has more to prove to the White Sox. Either way, look, there are a lot of question marks with this starting rotation, and we haven't even started talking about, Michael Kopech really in depth and what we can expect for him in 2023. But it's going to be very interesting to see, how Clevinger looks. And I love hearing that he believes the velocity will come back. This one, great question from Tyler. Jerry Reinsdorf wants to act like a small market team in a big market, so why don't they try to fill the front office or scout department with people who have helped the Rays, for example, become decent with a good year every now and then? Great question by Tyler. Thank you. This continues to be a major issue. I've talked about this with Sox fans. We've talked about it on this podcast. Change might be able to happen while Jerry Reinsdorf is still the owner, but he would have to completely clean house, in my opinion. A president of baseball operations, general manager, farm director, bring in new, fresh ideas from organizations that have done it well. Stop keeping guys like Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn around because of just blind loyalty. But, I think Reinsdorf likes the comfort of people that will fall in line. His loyalty is legendary. These folks, they might know that things are done backwards. I mean, Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams might know, like, we're not doing the latest and greatest here with the White Sox, and that the White Sox are way behind in how to do things, maybe even from the analytical side. But there's job security there, and Williams and Hahn have jobs for life, I think. I believe the White Sox are starting to change for the better based on the Grifol hire outside of the organization for the first time in forever. And, of course, his coaching staff, aside from Daryl Boston. I wish Jerry Reinsdorf would have reimagined the front office already with talent from, Tampa or St. Louis. Boy, St. Louis's program. Teams that seem to be constantly in contention. It's maddening. And one of the reasons Jerry frustrates so many White Sox fans. Now, one positive that recently came to light in an Athletic article by James Fegan the other day, the White Sox have hired former Washington Nationals assistant general manager Sam Mondre Cohen. Mondre Cohen spent the past year as a consultant for the National League champion Philadelphia Phillies, an executive in residence at a biomechanics company called Reboot Motion, and as a senior fellow for Wharton's Sports Analytics and Business Initiative at the University of Pennsylvania. But Mondre Cohen is best known for his time with the Washington Nationals, where he was credited with effectively creating their research and development department and developing their internal statistical database. So Rick Hahn kind of talked a little bit about this type of stuff during the Grifol press conference, that the Sox have been way behind in certain things, but they also don't publicize, like in the media guide, for example, all of their analytical departments. So this hire could be something or nothing. But it feels like the White Sox are trying to make up for lost time wherever possible, and another outside of the organization hire. Gary Sanchez is still a free agent. I'm going to tell you why the Sox are likely to pass on his services despite the need for depth at that position. More on that in a moment. Okay, this question from Kevin. Should the Sox try to pursue Gary Sanchez for some catcher depth? Okay, so Gary Sanchez was mentioned by Jim Bowden of The Athletic as one of the 12 top remaining free agents. Gary Sanchez is going to be 30 years old, made $9 million with the Minnesota Twins in 2022. Is going to bat right, throw right, of course, a .9 WAR. This is what Bowden had to say about Sanchez. Sanchez provides raw power at the plate and a strong arm behind the dish. He's below average defensively and allows too many wild pitches and pass balls. However, he has hit 154 home runs in his 8-year career and made 2 All-Star teams. he'd be a solid fit as a number 2 catcher and part-time DH matched up against certain pitchers. According to Bowden, best fits would be the San Francisco Giants, Boston Red Sox, Houston Astros, or Arizona Diamondbacks. So I've heard Gary Sanchez's name tossed around and on social media, on White Sox Twitter. And hey, look, the Sox, they need some depth. They need some catching depth. That is apparent when you kind of look down the line. And yes, we want Yasmani Grandal to return to form. I'm more confident in maybe his bat returning just than his physical ability to be behind the plate for multiple stretches, especially after all those knee problems. But we covered it. It's been well documented this offseason. Grandal's putting in the work. They still need depth. You got Zavala as your backup right now, and someone might emerge in spring training, but probably nobody to get terribly excited about. Sox need to think about the future. The defense obviously concerns me with Sanchez, and if maybe the Sox had some question marks at DH, but if Eloy Jimenez is going to be your primary DH, you still have, other options to DH. Benintendi might DH every now and then. You got, Gavin Sheets is a possibility. I don't think the White Sox are at all ready to spend that kind of money if that's what Sanchez is going to command, something similar to his 2022 salary, if they are claiming to be financially strapped right now. If you had that type of money laying around, I would say you go address second base, or maybe even play around with, some pitching depth still. So catching situation still needs to be addressed, but I don't think it's going to be with Gary Sanchez. Hey, thank you once again for, answering the call with Mailbag Wednesday. Going to try to do that every Wednesday as we lead up to when pitchers and catchers report. So about mid-February, when we get back to our 5 episodes for the week. So again, that email is lockedonsox@gmail.com. You can also send me a direct message if you're on Twitter quite a bit, but I know there's some folks that just aren't on social media. It's easier for you to email, and that's where you go, lockedonsox@gmail.com. Really appreciate all the questions. Thanks so much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter @LockedOnSox, and you can find me on Twitter @Nick_GGTB. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channels. We are starting to get to that 1,000 mark, which is amazing. Pass it along to other Sox fans in your life. And again, Mailbag Wednesday will be next week. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up in the next episode, I'll continue to examine off-season scenarios as we count down to spring training. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, and until next time, go Sox.